Maybe all of it. I thought that because the bad guys in the first book are cliquish cops, so I wanted to put graffiti on the wall that pertained to the cliques of the cops and to Bruno. So I had Bruno's sons up there, the name up there, and it was on the side of a house with the headlights on it. So they all loved it. And I said, so are you going to take a picture and send it to me? And the couple guy goes, no, why don't you take a picture and send it to us? So Mary goes out and she graffitis the side of our house. And we put the headlights on it.
I'm sorry, we're having our own interview here.
I know.
Okay. Okay. So they liked it so much they put it on the front cover.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So we live in the wine country, and people come over for a wine event at our house, and they see the graffiti on the house. They go, "Oh my God, you got gangs in the area."
Jeez.
Okay, ready to start.
Okay.
You can cut down my bio.
Are you going to introduce the other, or am I going to introduce you and you introduce him?
Do you have a bio that you would like me to read?
Whatever you want, yeah. I'm fine.
Or did you have? Yeah, why don't you do that and then I'll kind of set the stage here. I know, just do here. No. Because that's actually my teaching. Just here, do that. I can find out.
Cross off the third paragraph.
Absolutely. Cross off whatever you want.
And then the second paragraph.
And like the ending and the beginning too.
They're zooming. You're on camera.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So welcome everybody. Hi. Welcome to the very last book signing at Murder Engagement. I hate to put a downer on it. And normally at this point, what I do is I tell you about all the upcoming events we have. So even though this is the last book signing, we do have one upcoming event that some of you know about and some of you don't. We are having a going away party on April 8th. It's a Friday evening from 5 to 9, kind of an open house, come whenever you want. And the party, you may say, how can you afford to spend money on a party? You know, you should pay your rent for another month and stay, open for another month. And the reason is that the party is being sponsored by Andrew Gross, Hank Phillippe Ryan. Stacy, help me out here. Heather Graham. Linda Fairstein.
MWA?
No.
Not yet.
So, but anyway, so it's going to be a very nice party, and we hope to cater it, and it'll be right here on April 8th, Friday evening. 5 to 9, open house. Come anytime between those hours. Don't come before 5 unless you want to help us move furniture. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, so that's our one upcoming event. Those are 2 upcoming events. I like the party much better. So anyway, welcome tonight. We have David Putnam here talking about his new book, and interviewing him will be Micki Browning. So let me introduce Micki first. You may have met her. She's been here before. She has had signings for 2 of her books here. Micki has served 22 years in law enforcement. You know, Micki, you can make this type even smaller if you want.
You know, I just want you to go out with a bang.
Okay, so Micki has served 22 years in law enforcement. She started when she was 10 and retired as a captain before turning to a life of crime fiction. She's a graduate of the FBI National Academy, served as a hostage negotiator, trained as a SWAT administrator, supervised the administrative division, and coordinated the Citizens Police Academy, where she met a quiet student by the name of Sue Grafton. As Emmy Browning, she writes the Joe Wyatt mysteries. Shadow Ridge won the Colorado Book Award for mystery and the silver medal in the popular fiction category of the Florida Book Awards. It was awarded a starred review by Booklist. And then her follow-up, Mercy Creek, was labeled a heartfelt procedure by Kirkus Reviews and was included in Mystery Scene Magazine's Fave Raves of the Year. And she will be interviewing David Putnam. Now, during his career in law enforcement, best-selling author David Putnam has done it all. He's worked in narcotics, violent crimes, criminal intelligence, hostage rescue, SWAT, and internal affairs, to name just a few. How many years were you in law enforcement, David?
31.
Again, started when he was 10. The Sinister is the 9th novel in his best-selling Bruno Johnson Crime Series, following The Disposables, The Replacements, The Squandered, etc., etc. Putnam lives in the Los Angeles area with his wife, Mary, who is also here tonight. So please welcome Micki and David.
Thank you very much. As Joanne just mentioned, The Sinister is the 9th in the series, starring Bruno Johnson. Now, Bruno is an ex-cop, and a lot of PIs start off as an ex-cop, but we have here where you kind of blew that up. You blew up any chance of him, going back to law enforcement. And why did you choose that route? You made him an ex-con. Why did you choose that particular route for Bruno, and how does it define his character?
As I was talking earlier, I started writing in 1989, and I tried everything to get published. I wrote police procedurals, mysteries, young adult, fantasy, sci-fi. I tried everything to get published. So I was trying a police procedural, and I shipped it to a thriller structure. And with that thriller structure, I wanted to have as much emotion in the book as I could. So I made him African American, which added another layer of conflict. He's an ex-con, which means everybody's after him, the cops and the bad guys are after him. So he has 3 levels of conflict, and that's why I did it.
Okay, and in this particular book, Bruno is on the hunt for kidnappers, and the victim is the granddaughter of the FBI deputy director, who happens to be a friend. Considering the scale of resources the FBI has at hand, why Bruno? Why was Bruno approached to solve this?
What happened is I wrote 4 books. I sold the first book, Disposables, and I stopped writing the book I was on and went to a sequel right away because I know the publishers want a series. So I did that for 4 books. In the 4th book, I got a little overzealous, and I shot Bruno and kicked him, and he was emotionally broken. And the publisher says, "I don't know where you're going to go from here with the series." So I'm not, oh man, how am I going to pull him out of this? So I started a sequel. I mean, a prequel, excuse me. So the Innocence is a 4-book run, Innocence, and then the Reckless and the Heartless, and then the Ruthless is the last one, are all prequels, which handle the background of how Bruno Johnson came where he was in Disposables. So the question was about,
why would the FBI?
Because the FBI director kind of blackmailed Bruno into helping him in The Vanquished, and that's how they became friends. I had worked on an FBI team, and we got along initially, and then we didn't get along, and we separated on an FBI team. And there was a little bit of animosity, so I tried to embarrass the FBI, and I called my buddy in LA, and I said, "Give me the LA's top 10 most wanted," because I was pretty good at fugitive hunting, and that's what Bruno does. So I think within 3 weeks, I caught 3 of their top 10 most wanted. And then my captain called me back and said, "Okay, that's enough. You gotta come back to our county." So, okay. Okay. From that, I had my FBI experience. I made Bruno work with the FBI, and that's where I got the idea from.
Excellent. One of the things that you just mentioned, that gets really played up in fiction is the animosity between the different agencies. And I didn't actually see that much in this particular book, which was refreshing. Do you play that up in your other books?
Yes, I think it was not the Innocents. Which book was it? Each book is a snapshot of my career. So the Heartless is when I was fugitive hunting, and some crooks, some female girlfriends of the murder suspects went into our visiting at Samuel County Sheriff's with cordless drills, and they drilled out the window, and 6 murder suspects escaped all at once. And so I was pulled in to chase those guys, even though I was doing something else. I didn't want to, but they pulled me in and chased them anyway. That was the Heartless. The Innocence is Bruno's first day as a detective. His first day as a detective, and there's a knock at the door, and a woman that he knew from his past hands him a baby and says, "I can't handle it," and he didn't know he had a kid. So it's first day plus the baby, and then I'll speak up. Okay, sorry. So the FBI book, I can't remember which one, but it was when I was chasing bank robbers. So it was Reckless. Reckless was my time in the bank robbers, chasing bank robbers, and I put my experience directly in that book. So if you want to see the interaction between county and FBI, I wrote it just the way it happened in that book.
In that book. Okay. Getting back to the Sinister, loyalty is a theme throughout the book, whether it's loyalty to a person or to an ideal. What or who is Bruno loyal to?
Bruno is loyal to doing what's right, no matter what. Even if it's legally wrong, he will cross the line and do what's morally right. He's most loyal to his father. He has a great deal of respect for his father, and his father gives him a lot of tips throughout the books. And Marie too. Marie is like a sidekick, and she in the Replacements. The Replacements was the next book I wrote, and I wanted to write about the most dangerous person I ever dealt with, the most evil person I ever dealt with. And his name was James Lawless. That was really his name, James Lawless. And people say, "Aren't you afraid of telling, what his name?" I said, "Crooks don't read." So I'm not worry about getting wrapped up with that guy. So this guy was tattooed from his jaw all the way down to his toes. And he had a ram on his pelvic area, a horn on each hip, and his penis was the snout of the ram, all tattooed, right? So this guy was very, very bad. And I wanted to put him in the book. So, when you have a hero like Bruno, I had to give him flaws, otherwise he turns into a caricature, right? So for a bad guy, you got to give him flaws. I had to give this guy a little bit of humanity because this guy was pure evil. I'm not going to the background of what he did, but so in the third book, I disliked him so much, and his name was Carl Drago in the second book, that I killed him off in the third book because I didn't like him, and I gave him a pretty good death in the third book. Well, I sent it to the publisher. "Oh, we love the book, but you can't kill Drago. We love Drago," because I went over the line with the humanity, and so I had to rewrite the third book. They rejected it in December. I had to write it from December to February, and I resubmitted it, and I kept the title, and I rewrote the whole book. And he said, "Oh, this is a great rewrite." Well, it wasn't a rewrite because I kept the title.
Well, we see Carl again in the Sinister.
I'm carrying him through all the books now. I had to change him up a little bit because he was too evil in real life.
Okay.
And James Lawless is in for the rest of his life in prison.
Well, as you mentioned Marie, and in fact, that's what this next question is. It's a rare character. It's a rare character who works alone, and Bruno has a small group of people that he trusts and surrounds himself with. Marie is Bruno's wife, and Bruno loves her very, very much. How does that complicate or benefit his life, considering the things that he does?
Bruno wouldn't survive emotionally without Marie, because so much has been dumped on him emotionally that he couldn't continue with Marie. In that first book, Disposables, I just talked about how they met, but she was a physician's assistant, and the night that Bruno was brought in Disposables, he was shot in the butt by his partner, Robbie Wicks, And that's where he met Marie. She's the one that worked on his bike. And
And it was love at first sight. Well, it seems that her profession comes in handy when your name is Bruno.
It lends itself, yes. And I do beat him up, even in the books I just finished writing. He gets beat up in the last two books. That he's constantly recovering. And Marie actually says something about it. She says, when you turn 60, you're not going to be a lock.
Well, then there's Howard Owsley, aka Whitey, a smart talking weasel of a character. That's Bruno's best source of information, which Whitey reluctantly gives up, and is the source of frustration for Bruno, but he's the source of humor for your readers. I just loved him as a character.
Thank you.
How did Whitey come to life for you?
Well, I was very successful at what I did because of my informants. I always treated them fair. I never lied to them, and I had a lot of informants, and he's an amalgamation of a lot of people I dealt with. One person that was Ollie Belvin. She was this woman that when I went after those 3 FBI most wanted, I went after a case that she was involved in, and she flipped for me, and she gave me one of those guys that FBI had been chasing for 2 years. So she actually caught what's called the 007 syndrome. I don't know if you've heard about it. Where an informant likes the adventure and the intrigue of working with the cops, and she caught that, and she would call me up and say, "Hey, you want this guy? Hey, you want this guy?" And I did everything I could to protect her because she was so valuable. So there's another character, a real life character. I think his name was Robert White, and this is who Owsley is taken after. In real life, he would go into prison, get next to the most sensational criminal he could, and get information from him, and then trade his life. So the DA would give him life, get his years back to him, and let him out of prison if he would give up the other crook. And that's how Owsley came into being.
You mentioned flipped, and not everybody might realize what that is. Can you tell us what it means when you flip someone?
What? Loudly? You flip them loudly? When you contact a crook, this woman, she was stealing cars, and I started tracking her. So they gave me a case. I took the case that the FBI was chasing, and instead of going after the crook that they're looking for, I went ancillary. And I read all the cases that they're involved in, and I took an ancillary person who happened to be Ollie Belvin, who was stealing cars. So she was in this BMW, I think it was a 700 series that was stolen, and I got onto her. We were in it was a Mercury with a 6-cylinder, and she made us on a surveillance, and so we started chasing her in this plain car. And I'm on the phone trying to call in people that black and white to come in and get us. And she could have outdriven us because that car was super powered. And she was taking the corners wrong, and we were staying with her. And finally, she was going to get away. She hit an open along. And so I told the driver, I said, pull up next to her. And so I just got outside the car with my gun and got her face and said, I'm going to shoot you if you don't pull over. So she pulled over. So then I arrested her for the stolen car. And I tell her, if you don't want to go to jail for the stolen car, you got to give me Bunky, the guy I was after. And she said, yeah. And that's when you flip somebody. You take the crime that they're wanted for, and you flip them, and you don't prosecute them, and they turn on the other guy. And that's what I do. That's what I was good at. So,
with Bruno being an ex-con, is there a line that he won't cross? And if so, what is it?
Bruno has his own sense of street justice. He doesn't mess with plugging the crook into the justice system. If Bruno's after him, then he's already crossed the line, and he's a threat to public safety, and Bruno takes care of it. And that's just the way he deals with it.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a line that he wouldn't cross to enforce what he is thinking of as justice.
He won't hurt women or children, but anybody who hurts a child or a woman, and he goes after him and he puts them away.
Now, this next question that I had, you've already touched upon it, as far as you wrote after the 5th book of the series, you did your prequels.
Right.
Why did you opt to come back?
because I completed, when I wrote the disposables, the first couple of first 3 chapters, I just made up all the backstory, and I just filled Bruno's backstory up. So by the time I got to the 4th book and the prequels, I had finished that story arc of how he got to where he was in disposables. In fact, the publisher says, you're going to write a prequel trilogy. And I said, and when I got into it, I said, "Ooh, I can't do it in a trilogy." She goes, "Okay, it's a 4-book trilogy." So I wrote a 4-book trilogy.
See, and who says you can't put backstory in something, right? We're going to switch a little bit to focus on you for a bit. You work for several agencies. We've already heard that in your bio, and you obviously have a tremendous wealth of experience in all of the different duties that you have done. You were working in internal affairs in the sheriff's department when you interviewed for an agency in Hawaii.
That's true. My biggest error in law enforcement was shifting to promoting to sergeant. I lost my autonomy as a detective. They would leave me alone, let me do anything I wanted, because I would go out and put some just major cases together. So when I promoted, I had to go back into jail and work the jail. I had to come out and work patrol and work the detective bureau. And then they wanted to promote me to lieutenant. So they said, you got to go to internal affairs. And if anybody puts in for internal affairs, they don't want it, because they want people that don't want to work in there. And I did not want to work in it. So my old captain became the undersheriff, and he called my captain 3 times and says, "You got to get him." So I'm working internal affairs, and it is just awful. They said they'll promote me in a year to lieutenant, and I'm interviewing my friends, sitting across the table, and they would reach over and turn the tape recorder off and say, "You and I used to do this stuff, but times change. You can't do that stuff anymore." That kind of thing. I even tried to help them, giving them hints on what to say, and they would get mad at me, and it was just brutal. So I was sitting at the computer one day. My wife was born and raised in Hawaii. We always talked about going back, and I just randomly filled out an application for special agent for the state of Hawaii, Hawaii 5-0. And they called me, and I flew out there, did an oral. It was the most extensive oral I ever taken. And then they actually hired me. So I retired at 50 years old and double dipped and went to work for Hawaii 5-0.
So you went from an incredibly large and busy agency to an island.
Screeching hell.
I was going to say culture shock.
Yeah, I was juggling, I think, 30 IA investigations at once, and those are very technical investigations. It's not like it's more like a homicide with its technical aspects of it. And so it was a big caseload, and I didn't mind it because it kept me busy. I go to Hawaii, and they would give me like 6 cases, and I would do them real quick and turn them in. And my peers are coming in and go, "Hey, we love that you do these cases, but hold them for a month before you turn them in." I said, I can't do that. At the same time, they up this Hawaii 5-0 TV series, right? So I'd come to work, and the fake Hawaii 5-0 cars parked in my slot where I'm supposed to work, right? And one time I was on the phone, and they're having a shootout outside the back door. I'm trying to tell the witness, "No, everything's fine here."
It's cool.
Yeah. So they flew me to every island to do investigations, and there was some interesting stuff that happened. But overall, there's no crime in Hawaii because it's an island. Where are you going to run, right? So my first case was, I think it was, I forgot what the investigation was, but I write it up, and I tell my boss, I go, "Hey, I'm going to go keep this guy's going and take him to jail." And he goes, "Whoa, we don't do that here." This is my first experience with that. I go, "What do you mean you don't do that here?" Looks at the calendar, he goes, "Call him up and tell him to come on Thursday, because the bus will be here on Thursday." So we call the crooks up. They come and get in the bus, and they drive them all to jail at once.
Oh, if only it were that easy everywhere.
It was crazy. The way it was like a shock.
Did you ever get in a foot pursuit in Hawaii?
No, they didn't.
They just didn't. Nope. Okay.
No.
All right. Moving right along.
And I was pretty old. What? Oh, yeah, well, they gave me this major real estate investigation because I had more experience than anybody at the time, and it was a 1031 exchange Ponzi scheme. So I had to do subpoenas to all these banks and escrow companies, and it was a major deal. So the crook who lived on Kauai He was a middleman for the 1031 exchange. So I had to get the Kauai Bank.
You might want to explain what a 1031 exchange is.
A 1031 exchange is when I sell a piece of property, I don't want to pay taxes on it, and I trade it for a like or higher piece of property. And so you can't touch the money, otherwise you pay taxes. So it goes to a facilitator, there's a name for it, I can't think of it. And that person holds it until this property clears escrow or you find that second property. So this guy with the second property, he had this big fund that he had money for that property, but he was investing in another guy who was a Ponzi scheme in the state of Washington. He had a big Ponzi scheme. So it was one guy that was Ponzi scheming with another Ponzi schemer that they didn't know he was a Ponzi schemer. So the house of cards fell. All these people lost their land. So I get a subpoena. I call Kauai Bank and I said, hey, I'm coming over to get records for so-and-so. Okay, come on over such and such a date. I tell my boss, I get a flight, rent a car, drive to the bank, and I walk in. I'm wearing a Hawaii. This is like one of my shirts. And I said, I'm the cops. Here's my subpoena. Oh, so-and-so is not here because they like the guy. You know, Hawaii is so I said, we talked to the manager. Manager comes, oh no, she's the only person that can do it. And I said, well, I flew out here. I'm sorry, I can't do it. So I take a chair from up to the side of I take the chair all the way over to the middle of the bank, and I sit in the middle of the bank, and I just sit there in the middle of the bank. Everybody's moving around me, and everybody's talking, and the manager comes over, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'll give my records. They didn't know how to handle me in Hawaii.
You know, I think there's no better note to switch out of your career from that and talk about your new career. Your evolution as a writer. I know from personal experience that going from just the facts of report writing to fiction is not always smooth. Did you please tell me you had a better time of it than I did?
Well, because I love to read. I mean, as an avid reader from age 10, I read everything. I read everything. I also wanted to be a writer. I tried to write a book in high school, tried to write a book in high school, 2 books in high school. But I became enamored with law enforcement, so I took a different path. So I tell people that I've been writing short stories my whole career because my reports, they read like short stories. In fact, people would get in trouble in South Central Los Angeles, and they would call me on the radio and say, hey, would you come and write this for me? You know, officer involved shooting or use of force. Hey, would you come over and write this for me? So it wasn't as much of a transition, but because the fictive dream, you can't do the factual writing. You have to put the reader into that fictive dream and hold them there. And there's 16 precepts that I follow that hold that, and that's not anything you can do in law enforcement writing. Although a couple of times I wrote some memos and they kicked back and they said, no, we're not taking this fairy tale. You know, you got to rewrite it.
The question always comes up of every author. Are you a write by the seat of your pants kind of person, or are you an outliner?
I've had an evolution. I used to start with the most emotional scene I could think of, and I would write that scene. Didn't matter where it was in the book. I would just write that scene, and then that would give me the idea to spread the book out on both sides. And the longest time was I wrote the scene. It was 11 chapters before I could motivate it, because I go by motivation, action, reaction, and that's what would happen. But now I found that because I want to put more depth in my books, I take 3 plots and 1 theme, and then I do scene sequencing, which has really helped me write the books. So I'll write three scenes, motivation, action, reaction, on 1 plot line, and I'll transition and jump to another plot line, all the time following the theme of which is the background of the book. And that's the way I write it. I know the 3 plot lines, but I have no idea what's going to happen in the book. This has 2 twists in it that I did not plan. It just happened that way when I got to the end, because I'm carrying, there's 5 things a scene has to do, and I carry them forward, and that's the way it ends up.
What's next for you?
Ocean View is a great publisher. I wouldn't go with anybody else because I have so much fun with them. But they only take 1 book of mine a year, and I write 2.5 books a year. So I would write my contract book. Right now, Scorn comes out next February, and then they already bought Diabolical, which comes out a year from February, And then I just finished the next one, which was Scandalous. So I'm caught up with them till 2025. So I started another series, and the first one comes out in July. And the first book is called A Fearsome Moonlight Black. And because my career
Great
was,
title.
because blood in moonlight is black.
Right. Yep.
So it's the first half of the book. I tried to write a memoir 4 times. And I couldn't get it to work with the story arc. So the first half of the book is exactly the way it happened in my life because of the murders I happened into. I was 20 years old. My first officer involved shooting and a kidnapping I got involved in. I chased this guy up by myself and he grabbed the kid and it was a big, and I was in some horrendous stuff my first 2 years. So I wrote that just the way it happened in real life. And then at the last chapter of the first half, I put the transition for the fiction. And the second half is part true, but it's fiction. So that I think it's a really a dynamic book. And I'm halfway done with the next book in the series. And that one's going to be a Lonesome Blood Red Sun.
Another great title. You can see the pattern there.
Yeah.
Definitely. Who do you draw inspiration from as far as novelists? You said you were widely read, and I know it's a difficult question to hone down.
Well, I can't read a lot of books now because of my studying the craft. I see something like, oh man, I can't do that. Or the precepts are so obvious to me, I can predict what's going to happen too easily. And that's just because I study the form so avidly. But John Sanford, man, that guy, he writes the same kind of structure that I write. And you can see, I picked up another book. He has 2 books about this female hit person that he's chasing. And the first 3 chapters of this book is motivation, action, reaction. I mean, it's just exactly the way I write. So I guess I kind of relate to him more. But I like who's all the pretty horses. Cormac McCarthy, yeah, because his beautiful prose. The Train by Peter Dexter. Have you read that one?
I have not.
Oh, that is a beautiful book. It's in the point of view of an African American caddy in 1950s, and another character is a detective from LAPD. It is a brilliant book. That kind of thing. It's the writing that draws me in. Even though I read a lot of books, like the year before last, I read 125 books, and I did reviews on them. So you can follow me on Goodreads. In fact, some publishers are sending me their books now because I'm getting so many likes on my reviews, asking me to review their books. So John D. McDonald, John Sanford, James Lee Burke, his first 5. Some of the later ones started getting a little derivative, but Beyond Rain, and those first 5 are just brilliant books as far as craft. Joe Nesbo's recent book, The Kingdom, was just an unbelievable book. Loved it. I read everything. You can probably name somebody. I have my top 5 books are all historicals, though. I read a lot of within the genre that I write in. But my favorite book of all time is Lonesome Dove, just because the craft. If you haven't read Lonesome Dove, the
Amazing.
Characterization and the point of view, he'll shift points of view 3 times on one page, and it's so smoothly done, you don't even notice it. You never get lost. And I read it, I think 3 times, because that book is just, and that was his best book. I haven't found another one of his books that come even close to it. But Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy kind of mirrors that book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're both taken from Texas history.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know who we have on Zoom or whether or not we have any writers out there. Real quickly, because we're going to get to some questions here. What would one little snippet of advice be to writers?
First thing, I first sat down my first writing class, the instructor put big letters on the whiteboard, perseverance.
Absolutely.
You have to have perseverance. I was telling you earlier that I quit counting at 156 rejections. I was on my 4th agent. I was on my 38th, I was writing my 38th novel when I sold my 36th novel. So I learned my writing craft. I wrote my first book, I sent it out, and it came back with red ink on the cover page. It says, learn how to write before you resubmit. That's how bad my first
Ouch.
rejection was. And it kind of made me mad. I said, well, I'm going to show that. And then I got to where later on I was getting 2-page rejections saying how much they loved the book. And you go to acquisitions. I don't know if you know how it works, where you send it into a junior editor and the editor picks it up and says, oh yeah, I want this one. And then they go into a table with everybody vying for like 2 positions for that novel. And I made acquisitions twice in the Big 5. And so I haven't broken into that yet.
Well, now we're going to turn it over to questions either in here or on Zoom. Why don't we start with Zoom first, if there's any?
Yeah, absolutely. I have someone that was asking me if you could please loudly repeat your future titles that are coming out.
Okay. The newest book that's coming out in July is called A Fearsome Moonlight Black. And the second one that I'm writing is going to be called A Lonesome Blood Red Sun. And the third one I'm working on, I've got it, it's going to be a gray dawn. That's what I'm working on. I'm going to squeeze that in.
And does Ocean View keep your titles? They don't change your titles?
The first book, Disposables, it was called This Side of Forever. And because they said the title sounded too much like a romance, they said they didn't want to marketing would be difficult. So they just said, give us some other ideas. So I sent them 5 ideas. That's why I like Ocean View. They let me, they keep me involved in every aspect of the book. And they put a cover together. They sent it to me. What do you think about this? Now you can't, Big 5 doesn't do that. It's an amazing company.
How about any questions in here? Yes.
Is it a coincidence, your wife's name and your character's wife's name? Which came first? I'll say that one. I'm not
Well,
familiar, so.
We met in a novel writing workshop. She was trying to be a writer, and I was too. But I was chasing violent criminals so I would chase a violent criminal for a while, and I'd go to this writing group at night. And I was wearing denim pants and sneakers and a truck driver hat, and I wore these khaki shirts that said Carl and Grace Trucking. But I think at the time I was dean from facilities maintenance or something. So because I can't walk into every place because people make me as a cop, so I had to wear these shirts. So she goes, oh, he's not a cop. Look at the way he's dressed. I thought I was pulling one over on him. So I made her name Marie. I don't know why, but her name's Mary. In the most recent books, I actually put Mary St. John in the most recent books. And she's a concierge at the hotel that Bruno's working. And I kind of slap her around a little bit because
All right, we're not going to go into that part.
Uh-oh.
He steals my life.
Yes, she says something funny, it goes right in the book.
Were there any other from Zoom? Okay.
My African American protagonist.
Because it adds another layer of conflict. When I left Ontario Police Department, I had 4 years on the street. I'd been in officer-involved shootings. I thought I was at a pretty high level, but they still sent me to patrol school, and they put me with another training officer for 6 months. It's crazy. So I saw firsthand, because they went out with 10, and went out with 2 African-American deputies, and one was a good friend of mine from working in jail. And I saw the added level of conflict that he had to deal with. So I wanted to put that in the book and show it. Bruno sees that prejudice, but he's not aware of it because I don't want it to be a main theme in the book. So there are, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but in the book, it's not out in front, and I don't slap anybody face with it.
Yes.
My father was a turnkey in Getton, and he said there is that difference between state cops, city cops, and there is fierce. You don't want to call it officer, deputy. You don't want to call it a trooper, a deputy.
That's true.
They all have their own spots, and he said, yes, they are quite.
Yeah. And I treat everybody fair. I mean, I'm nice to them until they're not nice to me. So I was chasing this bank robbery. He committed 86 bank robberies from San Francisco to San Diego, and the FBI couldn't catch him. So I went after him, and they did a pretty good job on this investigation. But instead of going after him, I went after the girlfriends. And I found him and arrested him. And it's a long story, but I put him. I'm driving in a small car with my partner. We put him in a seat between us, and he's handcuffed. And we're driving him to jail. And he goes, "Hey man, I'm hungry." I go, "Well, what do you want?" He goes, "I would like a cheeseburger and a milkshake." So I pulled in the drive-through, got the guy a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And I told him that I was a U.S. Marshal that arrested him, because it gives him a little bit of, yeah, U.S. Marshal arrested me. And he goes, "It's a good thing the Marshal arrested me, because those deputies are."
I'm sure you found this the same way, but in kind of addressing what you had said there as far as the tension too between agencies, that all went out the window when somebody needed help. You call for help and suddenly it doesn't matter what agency you're working for, everybody comes. So, what did I forget to ask you?
I don't know. I could tell stories as long as you want me to tell stories.
How about a synopsis of what Sinister is
Right.
about?
Sinister is a kidnapping, because each one, I worked some kidnapping cases, and I didn't want it, everybody's doing kidnapping cases, and I didn't want to do a regular kidnapping, so I flip it on its head. I don't want to tell you what happens, but it's not your regular kidnapping case. And that's what I try to do. Every book, I try to do something different than everybody else is doing, so it keeps the readers interested. And I'm that without giving up what happens. Bruno is asked to track down some kidnappers, and he goes to the jail and interviews somebody, and he flips Whitey. And I thought the scene, I had a lot of fun writing that scene in the jail, because Whitey's got the teeth, the big teeth. And, yeah.
Okay, if for no other reason, you have got to buy this book for Whitey.
So the next book, Whitey's in the Sinister, but the Ruthless has a character just like him in the Ruthless as well. I started putting them in there. And then the next 3 books has the dog is such a strong secondary character. He's almost like a primary character. The Junior Mint is in the early books. I've got Waldo, who's Drago's dog, in the later books. And Waldo does not like Bruno, so Bruno's constantly getting nipped in the butt by Waldo.
It's a great cast of characters, and it's a good balance of characters. So without giving anything away, it's a very exciting book. It's fast paced. You're going to enjoy the characters, and it's been a pleasure for me to sit here beside you this
Well,
evening.
thank you.
So we know where Waldo? We now know where Waldo is. Right?
And you do know where Waldo is.
Yeah, where's Waldo? Did you have something
One
else?
other question?
Stephanie Levine is asking what your typical day writing is like.
Oh, well, I was writing when I was working full time, so I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would write till 7 o'clock, and then go to work. And I write 1,000 words every day. It's usually now 1,500 to 2,000. But I go back 20 pages. I only do one draft. I write one draft, and I'm done with the book. But I go back 20 pages, and I start forward in the morning, because so much is dependent upon atmosphere and tone. Tone is very critical. So if I sit down and start writing, and I'm a little bit depressed, a little bit elated, that tone's going to pop up in my books. You can't help it. It might be insidious, but it's there. So I go back and I edit forward 20 pages, and then I start the new stuff. So I'm circling back on my work 4 times before I move on. So that's why I write. And I write a living document, just like I would with internal affairs. I have my notes at the bottom, and I think of something that I want to bring forward. I put it at the bottom of my notes, and when I get to it, I just delete it. So I have a continuing document.
Is that why you wrote your first 4 books?
The woman in the back, the pretty woman in the back, just asked me how I wrote my first 4 books. I was an avid reader, and I couldn't believe that they gave me a gun and a fast car and told me to go chase crooks. I mean, I would have done the job without being paid for it, because I was having so much fun. So then I was working narcotics, working on Major's crew, and we were on a surveillance of a meth lab out in the middle of the Lucerne Valley, and there was nothing out there. And so I keep novels in the backseat of my undercover car. So when we're on a surveillance, it's not like in the movies where everybody's watching one guy has the eye, everybody else lays off, and the guy calls it. You rotate the eye so nobody gets fatigued. Well, then I get to sit there and read a book. So now they give me a gun, drive a fast car, chase crooks, and I get to read a book. So I was on my last novel. The first book was an international bestseller. It was a great book. This is a sophomore effort. And what happens with writers so many times is that they write the first book. It takes them 10, 15 years to write the first one, and then they sell it. They have 1 year to do that again, and they can't pull it off on a sophomore effort. And so a lot of them drop out because of that. So this second book was just a dog, but I was a captive audience. I had to read it. There's nothing else to do. So I read the whole book and I thought, oh, I could do better than this. So I've quickly found out that a good writer makes it look easy. So I hand wrote my first 4 novels on the front seat of my undercover car. And each book was 4 legal pads long. And then I did my first series, 4 books, longhand writing. Thank you, person in the back.
Do you ever go back and read these books that you tried to write in high school and just like, oh, I can't believe that how bad that is?
Yeah, well, I go back and read some of the earlier Bruno books, and I can't believe how much I evolved. The writing continued. I go to writing conferences and book conferences, and I keep going in because I'm constantly learning. You constantly learn new things every time. I teach now. I teach a class on how to write a novel too. Anybody who asked for it, I did an online one here on a novel. But I did one writers group, and they emailed each other, and pretty soon I'm moving them all over California because they like the way my perception of how to write a novel. I write by numbers because I've got dyslexia. So like I said, there's 5 things a scene needs. There's motivation, action, reaction. There's 16 precepts a book has to have. So when I never get stuck, because if I get stuck, I go back and go, oh, right there, I messed up right there in my transition. So it's easy. That's why I can write so quickly.
I wanted to ask, but this method you're using, is that strictly something that would strictly work for procedural, or would it work for other?
Any kind of novel writing. But it's my workaround because I've read some great books on how to write. The best one was Techniques of a Selling Writer by Dwight Swain. I liked him so much that I went and bought his lectures because he was a lecturer at Oklahoma State. And I would listen to his lectures back and forth. Seminole County is 20,000 square miles. It's one of the largest counties in the United States. So when I was on a SWAT team, we'd get a page out. See, when I was on a SWAT team, we had pagers. They would page us to the airport. We would just show up at the airport, we'd get out, get in our gear, get in a helicopter, and they would fly us to the SWAT call. I don't know what I was going with that. Losing my. Yeah. Yes, it was. Yes, it does. Right. And I think my training on law enforcement and SWAT gives me the discipline. Because when you're going to a SWAT call out, your trunk of your car, you have to have everything in one place where you know where it is because it's dark. You can't turn a light on. So you got to gear up blind. And so it gives you a discipline. You start thinking way in advance of what you're doing. And that's what helps me in the books too.
Anything else from our Zoom folks?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So David's books are available here, and he'll be happy to sign. And also Micki.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. It was nice.
I very much appreciate it. I'm not used to interviewing somebody